Okay, great, and here we are. So, how to upgrade to version 20 of Sage 100 Contractor, and this is what we're going to talk about today. This is a planning, so we've got some planning that we need to do. There are some changes coming. Here are a couple of the things that are on the docket for us to talk about. This is the biggest change in about 10 years of the software. The last big one was version 16, was pretty critical. Version 18 introduced the rolling quarters, rolling years, but this one is a pretty darn big change. Everyone will be affected, and some more so than others. The preparation for this includes many facets of your business. It's not just your IT, it's not just your office. It will be a group effort. And all mission-critical processes will need to be tested. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what to test and how a little further in the slide deck. So first I'd like to have you meet our panelists. Many of you know Christopher Wendt. He does our programming, our systems, and workflow, and has worked with many of you in those capacities. We also have Mary Zerlin, a consultant, a business consultant, and also a controller. And James Wass. Jim is a senior network technician and the IT manager for our group. And I am Catherine Wendt. I also do business consulting, and I am the department manager, which is why we're doing this all together. So, for today, what is SQL, often referred to as SQL, and why is Sage doing this to us? Network and server setup and configuration. We want to talk about that. There's some company setup and administration, and this part is new. We're going to talk about the testing of the key processes and procedures. And are there changes to the user experience? What will our users see when they log on? And lastly, we want to make sure that you are prepared before you do the official cutover. This is different than all previous updates. So why, oh why? So this update is long overdue. We've been waiting for it for a number of years. Actually, since Sage purchased it. So it's been several years now. The addition of SQL provides a great platform for handling the data within the program, change logs, which we've never been able to go back and see who changed what, and increase performance, which is what SQL is all about. The version 20 release brings Sage 100 Contractor up to date in the software industry. This product, we've been with it for 22 years. And when we joined it, it was on version 6. So this product's been around a long time, and it needs to be brought up to this more recent software industry standards. So is your network ready for SQL? Great question. We're going to ask you to start by involving your network technician. We're going to suggest you read through the Sage System Requirements document. You all received it in an email blast from Sage. You can also get it with your user logon. And of course, you can send us a quick email and we can send you a PDF of that. Read through it, get familiar with the technical requirements spec sheet. SQL Server is required, and SQL Express will be fine for most of our companies. And when I say most, about 90% of you. So there'll be a few exceptions, and we can proactively talk with those that applies to. You're going to check your available server space. Above and beyond the 85-15 rule, which I'll let Jim talk about, both programs will need to be installed at the same time. Migrated data sets are larger than their source data sets. And there is an initial database administrator configuration, and that's going to need some space too. So what I'd like to do is turn that over to Jim to talk about a couple of these items specifically. So here's Jim Watts.
Hi all. So talking about the big differences in the way data is handled in the new version of Sage, obviously Kathy's highlighted the SQL database engine that is in use. Prior instances of Sage used flat files. SQL Server is a full-blown database engine, which takes some space to install and takes substantially more system resources. Those resources, simple requirements on processing power, you need at least a minimum of 4 cores available to run the SQL instance. and you need additional memory. We're recommending at least 4 gigs free, so SQL could process the data properly. The database sizes that we've done some conversion testing with some client data sets, and what we've seen is that the database sizes are approximately 4 to 6 times larger than the current data sets in Sage 100C today. So you will need additional space to house those items. In the migration path we're suggesting is to do a side-by-side install. So you will need those additional resources, plus probably an additional 10 gigabytes to handle the side-by-side installs. This will be determined based on individual client data set sizes. There's also additional concern about running where and how you run this. SQL is recommended not to run on a domain controller. So for people hosting with us, they will have no issues. For sites that have one server, we have to be a little more careful with how we decide to install that, but we will review those on an individual client basis. The database administrator application is also a little bit different. It includes backup functionality built in, so it will take snaps of the database based on the time frames we set up in the schedule. You still do need a full offsite backup, so the clients that are using our BDR solution, Datto, will be in good shape. But other clients, we may suggest looking at different backup solutions.
Maybe you could speak to that 85-15 rule I mentioned a little bit.
So the 85-15, as Kathy mentioned in the earlier slide, is we look to make sure that there is at least 15% free space on a given server. Otherwise, we look to do some cleanups. So the clients who are tight with space right now, who are barely making the 85-15 rule, are going to require some additional updates, maybe additional storage space to house the side-by-side installs we plan on doing.
Okay. All right, thank you. I'm sure there'll be some more questions later, Jim. So for those of you who have gotten every bit of life out of your server over the years, and you're out there, we know you've got servers that are 6, 7, even 8 years old. Congratulations, you are to be applauded. You've taken great care of your equipment. It's lasted you a long time. If you're near the end of life on that and you do not seem to have sufficient space to make this upgrade, this might be a time to take a step back and find out if this is your opportunity to replace that equipment, or perhaps look at a hybrid hosting on-premise solution, or maybe even look at a cloud solution in replacement. We're happy to talk to you about those things. That's not the topic for today, but if you are short on space, or you've got an aging server and you have some concerns about whether you can add any more memory to it or add any more drives to it, this is a good opportunity for you to take the next couple of weeks and dive into that question before you move forward with the next steps we're about to present. So I'm going to keep going here. A note to all of you Office people, all the data sets will be migrated during this process. You will move everything over to version 20, and that includes your prior year data sets. If you have separate payroll data sets, all of those will need to be migrated over, so that's something to be prepared and ready for. Okay, so the new database administration tool. I'm going to turn this over to Chris, and he's going to talk about this. He's actually done quite a bit of the testing in our test environment, and actually has had some really fun, if you want to use that word, fun times kind of going through that and getting familiar with this new database administrator tool.
I don't know if I would say fun, but there are some actually pretty cool things that are coming with it. The first being that when you have the new database administration tool, since it is such a big move between the old type of database and the new one, it's going to give you an error report from your data migration. So when you convert your version 19 data up to version 20, you'll get a list of all the records that said, oh, it had a negative value here, or this had a letter in the wrong spot, or something like that, that you'll probably want to go through and adjust at some point before your live migration. So that'll happen during the test part of your process. Another nice little benefit is the nightly backups and audit logs. So the backup is more of a snapshot than a backup. It saves a copy of your database that night, and you can choose how long you get to save that for, which can be very helpful. The snapshot, that means that within Sage, you have that snapshot to go back to when you need it, but it doesn't mean that you get to just not back up your server then. Makes the server backups even that much more important. Then in audit logs, what that means is we get to look at who changed what exactly when, which is probably one of the most often questions I get. Because of those two new features that are going to give you way better management of your data, it's going to mean a lot more space as you use it. So depending on how long you're keeping some of that information, your database is going to get that much bigger, that much quicker.
So Chris, a quick question then. With these snapshot backups, do I have some control about how frequently? And it sounds to me like that could eat up a lot of space on my server.
Yeah, so those are always going to be scheduled for nightly, and then the database administration tool lets you choose how long you can keep them for. So you can keep them for only the latest one, 2 weeks, or all the entire time. So you have 5 or 6 options on that. If you're doing a good quality server backup, then keeping all of those forever is not really going to be any benefit, because you'd probably look to add, if you're really looking at a year-old snapshot, it probably means you need to be looking at something on your server backup instead.
Okay, thank you.
The supervisor account is no longer going to exist. In general, it's not a great practice to have one account that a bunch of users are logging into. It pretty much makes every network guy, keeps them up at night, just can't track who did what. Instead, you get to choose each user that you want to give administrator rights to, which means that they're going to be able to do all the things that the supervisor used to be able to do. So it really doesn't add any setup. You just need to make that decision before you go live on that.
So Chris, is that something then, when I first install this and I'm first migrating my first data set, do I make the decisions then, or do I have to keep returning to this?
You make the decision, well, you have to make the decision your first migration. You have to pick one person. It's a requirement for any database, and that would be your main tester. Whoever is testing this, whoever's going to do that first migration when you're testing it before there is a test account, or before you're going live on it anyway, you'll make them the admin. In most cases, it's going to be your controller, whoever's processing payroll, some of your key people. And then after you go live, you set that in the beginning to decide, here's who I want to give supervisor rights to. You do it one time, and then as you just maintain your users, it's kind of a similar way. Anytime you want to add an administrator or remove an administrator, you can.
So in our data set, then I could do that for myself when we go first do this. And then after I've done some testing, we're ready to go, I can make Mary have administrator rights too in the Syscon environments, so that she can perform her functions.
Exactly.
And if she doesn't have to log on as me, I can assign that for her and to keep my own, right?
Exactly, yep.
Okay, that's great.
And because of the audit logs, that makes the audit logs that much more helpful. So when it doesn't just say supervisor made this change, it actually says this user made that change.
So I'll know what Mary did.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you can blame her for everything.
All right, fair enough.
Then the toolbox is a new little feature that it has on there that'll give you a server health check, basically. It'll let you know, do you have the right drive speed, do you have the right network connection, network speed, things like that. Some real basic stuff that kind of just gives you a very high-level overview of, is there something that you need to dig into further. And then one of the last parts of this, the new database admin tool, is that you get to choose between a SQL account or a Windows authentication account for every one of your users. And the SQL accounts are basically the way that you used to think about all the Sage users. It's a user that you set up within Sage. It has its own username, its own password, and it's maintained completely within Sage. Then the Windows authentication is whatever you're logged into the computer as. So if everyone already has their own Windows login, you can now set up Sage to use that to give them the permissions and to manage what they have access to and when and who has administrator rights and stuff. So it's one less password for them to remember, one less way of managing users, and one less set of users you need to keep track of. And that's going to depend on kind of how you have your organization set up and who's using what when for which direction you decide to go.
So are you saying if I have a machine like maybe in my shop, and there's a more general login now just because we have a password and I maybe have some people in the shop using it at the same time, I would actually be able to authenticate some of these users differently?
Correct, yeah. So you could have your shop users, if they're on one shared machine, all have SQL accounts, and then you could have your office people with just log in using their Windows account. So that is, you can mix and match kind of however you need to.
Okay. And Jim, do you have any concerns about that, or are you excited about that option?
It's a great new security feature as long as there's a local domain in these offices.
Okay, and the local domain means that they have a regular network server.
They have a regular server that controls user authentication. Correct.
Okay, excellent, great, thank you. Okay, so I hope you didn't fall asleep over that. All right, we got more to tell you about here. So what's new for the users?
So for the users, once you log in, everything's installed, and this goes for the testing scenario, and it also goes for once you go live. The login screen does have a new look. It's not anything crazy, but the users will now only see the available companies, which is a nice kind of tweak to that and makes it a little bit more clear, so not everybody sees 15 companies and they all are only using one. And now, since we do have the supervisor as is gone, there's a new checkbox that says Open Company with Administrator Rights, which basically means to log in as supervisor. And then once you do get logged in, it's going to feel just about the same. So this is the screen that you're going to see when you first log into the when you first open up the program, and you can see that the authentication there says Windows Authentication, and you can also choose between the other one. And then my username is my domain name / and then my login. It's all grayed out because I don't get to change that. It's set to my Windows Authentication. It's stuck there, and it's gonna stay exactly where it should be, and then it can connect there. No extra password needed. Then once I actually hit the login button, it'll see the sample company. That's the only one I have access to. So even though there's about a dozen other companies on this server that I took a screenshot on, the only one that I gave this user access to was sample company.
Oh, and here's that box you were talking about.
Exactly. Yep. So this is the box I was talking about, where open a company with administrator rights and open a company exclusively. So those open company exclusively is just about the same as it was before.
Great.
The next screen you're seeing here, this is the standard login screen. It's you probably can't even tell that it's different here. It brought up the job screen, same menu, same options, just about everything. Once you open the program, looks the same. Oh, and one big difference, it has a little new icon. So
yeah, I see. So instead of our orange goofy icon, we have a green goofy icon. Right in that upper left corner. Okay, got it.
So the looking up changes in your data is one of the cooler new features. I don't know how well you can tell the color here, but in this one field that I've highlighted that says Shoe Shop for the short name, it's a slightly different color background. And I did that by just turning on the View Field Changes. And then if you hit the next one for me, when I hit F12 right in that spot, it's going to tell me that the test user on 214 changed the name from %complete to Shoe Shop. So I can see right there exactly what was changed, who changed it, what it was, and what it is now. And I can go into any job or field or anywhere and see that right off the bat. And it's going to keep a log of its history as long as you have it set for. So if you have your logs to be set for 7 days and the change was made a month ago, you won't see it there. But if you have your logs to be set for a month, you'll see every change that was made to that field within that whole month.
Well, that is really great, because one of the things I get a lot of questions about is, I was in the change order, last time I was here, I don't think this was the description, who changed this? And there's really no way to know, because of course there are a lot of fields in a change order screen that can be changed even after the record is saved. So that would be really helpful. But Jim, is there any implication to, like, if I save this forever, if I save these log files forever? I mean, what would be some considerations about how long I want to hold on to a change log file?
Well, from a security perspective, I think we would like to have them for a very long time, but it comes back to the space equation. So this is why we continue to emphasize having enough space to properly maintain these files for a long period of time.
Okay, so that might have a little bit of a trade. Are these usually really large log files, or is it just that there could be a lot of them?
They could grow fairly large depending on the amount of activity in the system. So again, having enough space to at least maintain a year would be great. Longer would be better.
Okay, so if I have a lot of people in my organization logging in, 20, 25 users, obviously my logs are going to grow a lot faster than if I have, 4 or 5 people in the actual program, and maybe my other 50 are in the field.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The larger the organization, the more activity, the faster these logs will grow.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the next thing I really wanted to talk about, thank you, Chris, thank you, Jim, is I wanted to talk a little bit about your testing process. So what we've been talking about so far is we have to install the new program. And as I mentioned in a couple of client videos, and I've mentioned in some of my newsletters, this version 20 is installed side by side right next to version 19. And we've been talking about the implications of that and some of the key things and decisions that are made at the time you do that first install and migrate that first data set for testing. But now what? What about the testing? What about the testing? So here's what we're suggesting you start doing right now in the coming weeks as you go through your weekly, monthly, quarterly, and looking back at some of the annual things that you're doing as you're wrapping up 2016. What are the reports you're using? Start making a log of those. And this would be for everyone. So the most important ones, of course, are going to happen in your bookkeeper or controller's office. But if there are reports that the project managers use, reports that the owner always looks at, anything like that within the program, or a custom report, or an Excel document that integrates that you've had written for that, even third-party products such as Sage Paperless, Sage Service Operation, anything like that that you're using, get it on the list. Those are going to need to be tested before you go live with version 20. All right, so start making that list. Contact your vendors. Ask them when they will have version 20 compatible releases and when those are going to be available. These are software report rewrites. So if it's software, for instance, maybe you use the Syscon over under billing report. That is a third-party software and integrates with Sage 100 Contractor, but you will need a version 20 compatible release of that. Crystal reports, custom reports, Sage Paperless, and some internal Sage 100 Contractor Master Builder reports will need attention or a rewrite in order to function with version 20. So make sure you have that list and contact your vendors for these third-party things that you might be using. After the initial testing data set is migrated, so going back to what Chris and Jim were talking about, install version 20, you take a current data set, you migrate it over to version 20, and now you're going to do some testing. And meanwhile, you and everyone else continue your day-to-day work in version 19. Okay, so now I turn to my little testing data set that I just migrated. After the initial data set has been migrated, you are going to run all those reports that are on your list and then compare the results with what you did in version 19. So great example. If you have a sales tax report that you run, maybe it's a custom sales tax report, and you have already filed January sales tax report. You have the results from version 19. Go ahead and run it in the version 20 converted data set. You should have the same result. But that's not all we're looking for. Did it run? If it ran, did it take about the same amount of time or maybe even less? Or did it really, like it was just hung, it just stayed there? What were the results of that? Then if the product runs, if the report runs, then the next thing you want to do is look at the accuracy of it. So you're going to want to do some comparisons there. Log the results on your little checklist. Go back and tweak anything you need to do, re-engage with a vendor, perhaps an adjustment to an internal report, and you're going to work your way through the list. What reports? So here's some custom reports and custom software comments. Custom reports within Sage 100 Contractor, need to be migrated with that database administration tool the screen that we had a little bit earlier. It's one of the things that happen during the installation and upgrade. All of the reports that when you get to a print screen that are numbered below 21, so maybe you have a custom aging report. So aging reports, AR aging reports are 313. And then many of us run the 26 report because that's the landscape version. We can see all the columns, all the totals are there. But if you had one made and it's numbered 05 or something less than 21, that means it was an internal report that was modified to fit a need that you had. Those need to be tested. So the 21 and higher, those are internal. We're pretty confident about those. Sage says that most of the reports that are below 21, those that have been modified, will convert just fine. But we don't want you to go live and find out a critical report isn't working. So this is where the testing is going to come in handy. The internal reports are not guaranteed. Go through the list. And all third-party programs that read or write to the Sage 100 Contractor database will need to be modified. So let me clarify what that means. Crystal reports, custom Excel spreadsheets that export or import data, integration pieces where you have another icon you click on and it looks at or grabs data from Sage 100 Contractor. And if you've been a client of Syscon for the last 20-something years we've been on this product, you may have a custom retail sales tax report or a custom over-under billing icon, or perhaps you have our indirect cost allocation icon, or maybe you have something special that we wrote just for you for work orders. These need attention. They will need rewrites in order to work with version 20. Get them on the list. And here's a couple examples of what those are. All right, make a list, check it twice. I know Christmas is over, but here you go. Prepare your network or the hosting environment. So those of you who don't have an internal server and you kind of phased out while we were talking about that part, phase back in. Your data's somewhere. It's somewhere. Perhaps it's in a shared environment, such as Syscon's Sage 100 Contractor multi-tenant hosting. Find out what the plan is. Is there a date that that environment will be going live on version 20? Is there a way for you to do some testing in a test bed environment before that go live? So that's important. If you're hosting on a private server, you still need to do this testing. We're going to need to install version 20 for you. You're going to need to go through this process. It'll just be on your hosted private server. If you have a physical server, all those things that Jim was talking about before apply. Contact any custom software vendors. Get quotes. I'm afraid to tell you, it won't be free. Won't be free. These are custom reports. Sage has changed the back end. These reports will not work. So as you're looking at that list of reports you use, this is a good opportunity to make sure that these all are reports that are important to you. They provide critical and important data, and perhaps you want to prioritize those, and those maybe are the first vendors you reach out to find out what you're going to need in order to get a version 20 compatible release. You're going to install version 20 right next to 19, servers, the server, and a workstation for the testing, and ultimately it'll go on other workstations. You're going to assign the supervisor status to a specific user through the database administrator tool that Chris was talking about. You're going to migrate a test data set and gather a list of reports and queries. Queries are on here. You're going to need to test those too. You're going to test your critical reports, queries, and custom tools. And then the last thing on this checklist is, do you have a target go live date? For those of you who are in the office and familiar with the data sets, I will tell you that Sage is strongly recommending, so you have to, archive any prior year data before you do this migration, the final migration. So for those of you who have regular calendar years, December 2016 was the end of your year. You're probably just compiling that info and getting over to your accountant right now. They're going to prepare the tax returns. They're going to get back with you maybe for some journal adjustments. You get those entries in. We need to get that data archived before you do the final cut over to version 20. Now, you can still do your testing on a migrated data set. You can still get all of these things in process, but 2016 will need to be archived before you do the final migration to version 20. all the data sets will be migrated. And then as Jim pointed out, they are larger in version 20 than their source data in 19. And ultimately, once you're finally on version 20, everything has settled in, you've confirmed you have access to everything, you've run a couple quarters, 19 can be uninstalled, and those version 19 data sets can be put on a hard drive or some kind of external thing, put in a safe place, and taken off your server to get that space back. But for a period of time, you will need to be able to run all of it in the same environment. So it's a lot to do. We get it. Make sure your server is ready. If you have some concerns, we can do a network review. If you are a networking client of ours, give the office a call, let Chris Jopa know what you need, and we'll get you on the list and take a look and make sure the resources that you need and do some planning with you. If we do not help you with your network, this is information you need to get with the people who do support your network. Get that tech involved, have them read those specs and the things we've talked about. If you need some assistance there, perhaps you have an internal person who does your day-to-day, but you could use a little help with this kind of planning, we'd be more than happy to come in, do a network review, and help you work out what you need. You can start testing with a separate environment. We have been tossing around, and we have the resources to set up a testing environment, especially for those of you who are in hosted situations. If you are interested in something like that, we'd love to hear from you. We're not sure how much interest there might be in that, and we do have the tools to do that. So let us know if you're interested in a temporary testing environment if you don't have a server, and some of you don't, or if you're in a multi-tenant hosting environment. You're going to upgrade your reports that you need with the custom report services. So what I'm saying here is, if you've got custom integration pieces, maybe you have a Crystal report that was written a number of years ago that needs to be rewritten, let us know, or see if you can return back to the person who wrote it for you. That will need some attention. If we can help you, we're more than happy to do that, in keeping with what I said about the custom software. Get the most out of Sage with our Sage Consulting Services. We are here to help you. We live and breathe this stuff, and we are in the same boat as you, because as most of you know, we run this program internally. All our techs are familiar with it, all our back office processes are familiar with it, and we're more than happy to be there and give you a hand. So other resources that you might want to get your hands on, we've highlighted a number of these steps in the Syscon newsletters, the most recent one being January. We also have August and September. These are all on our website under the newsletters, or we'd be happy to shoot you the PDF of that. We have some videos out there, again, most recent being in January, but there are some from last fall as well. Or go to our YouTube channel, and you'll see that there are several on this upgrade process. Sage 100 Contractor Specifications from Sage. These were emailed to you in an email blast from Sage with technical specs. That is available for you. You can download it from their site, log on as your client information, or let us know and we'll give you a hand. This webinar is being recorded, so if all goes well, we should be able to get that out on the website, perhaps on YouTube, and make that available for you to go back and maybe show a section to your IT person, or show a section to your controller, or someone else who maybe wasn't able to make this phone call. And our technicians and consultants, we're here to be a resource for you as well. So for the presentation purposes, we want to thank you for taking the time to hear us on this. I have been asked, I was on a call just last week, and the tech got on and said, you know, I'm not really sure why I'm on this call. We usually just download it, do a couple clicks, and we're off and running. This is why we've been highlighting this. This is a significant change. It's completely different than what we have done in the past for 20-something years for us internally, of course, and as an example. We also have additional information, scheduling, time with techs, whatever you need. Feel free to call Brian. His contact information is here right now. Or you can also just call the main office, tell Chris Jopa what you need, and we'll get back with you on that. If you are unsure or have some concerns about your own network, the resources, memory, space, we, again, would be happy to do that network review with you, for you, and see if we can help you with some planning. with that in mind, what I would like to do is open it up for some questions and turn it back over to Brian for anything that might have come in while we were talking.
All right, Kathy. Yeah, I do have a few questions here so far. First one is the database administration tool the SQL admin tool or something within Sage?
So the database administration tool is a program that is made by Sage. The installer pretty much has, this installer includes the database administration tool, it includes the actual client, and then the Sage Advisor. Usually they try to install in there as well. So it is a separate program from Sage 100 Contractor, but you can choose to include it with your same install. It is not the SQL Server Management Studio tool, which Sage actually discourages you from using on that instance because they have some very specific setup parameters for their instance.
So when we install the program then, version 20, at that time we're going to install the database administrator tool, and it will come up as something we can install during that upgrade process.
Correct, yeah, it'll come up during that upgrade process. It'll be its own separate icon, not within Sage 100 Contractor, and you would only put that on the server that you installed the instance on. You actually cannot access that. It won't let you access a Sage instance from any other server. So if I had that installed on my computer, even though I could log into Sage, I wouldn't be able to use the database administrator tool.
So it's not available to like everybody and his brother.
Exactly,
We have some
yeah.
control over who can get at it.
Yes, you have a lot of control over who can get it.
Okay, great. Brian?
Okay, next question. Our current server already has SQL 2014 running with a database for another product. Will we run a separate instance of SQL, or can we add the database to the existing instance?
So when Sage does the install, it does create a second instance. So you can use the same SQL install, but with a second instance. The one caveat to that is obviously depending on the version of Microsoft SQL you have installed. If it's Express, there are some limitations which may reduce performance.
Okay.
And Sage, actually, the database administration tool, when you migrate databases, it will only let you migrate to a Sage instance, like it's a particularly contained instance with some extra telemetry features and stuff like that. So you won't be able to really move them in between instances even after the migration, and you'll have to do all the management through that tool.
Okay.
Okay. All right. When we migrate to version 20, will the record numbers carry over as well? Example being in payables, we have a number of records. Will we see number of records in new version?
You will see the same record numbers. So the record numbers are the like job 2568. That's going to stay exactly the same. They are not always sequential. So depending on how your company runs things, they may or may not be sequential for you. But the record numbers will not change at all. Say it does have like a back-end new number that's associated with it that you'll never see in the front and only matters in the custom software, custom integration aspect of it. But from the front end of what you'll see, it's going to look basically, it's going to handle the record numbers exactly in the same way that it did before, and they'll be the same numbers.
So if I archive 2016 and all I have is 2017 records, and I go to my 4.2 screen to look at an AP record, if it was record 11,980 before I migrated it, it's going to be record 11,980 after I migrate.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks. Brian, you got another one?
Yep. How do we actually install version 20 from the Sage website?
So
from the Sage website is a question.
The Sage Advisor, if you use Sage Advisor, it's going to work kind of like before, where it'll say there's an update available, and you can download it from there. You would go to your Sage login, or your login account for Sage, download the file, and install it. So it's going to be handled basically, download it from the site. It won't be, and then when you install it, you'll have a couple options, whether you're installing for the server or that local computer. But you'll get the installer itself just by logging in and checking out the latest version.
So just to clarify, though, and I know that our techs do this, we take that new update, that new file, the new installation file, and we put it on usually an M drive, M for masters, so that we have exactly that version. And what we really want to do is we want to install that over our network. When we get to the point of installing on the workstations, we want to install it from within our network, not over the website and the internet from Sage. That's very time consuming. It uses up all your bandwidth. So what you want to do is get it down to your network environment before you go installing it on your workstations and your server. Okay, Jim, did I miss anything on that?
Perfect.
Okay, excellent, great.
right.
Brian, you have another?
That was the last of the questions in the question bar. I can unmute everybody if somebody else wants to say everything, so I'll go through that real quick and get everybody unmuted.
Okay.
So if anybody has a question, feel free to speak up.
How long, do we know how long Sage is going to support the current version?
Oh, that's a great question. So I've actually seen quite a bit of back and forth information from Sage on this. This was over.
Okay.
One second, I guess we're getting some feedback.
Yep.
Okay. This is an important point. So Sage wanted everyone on version 20.
Yeah, because we just called construction.
In writing, they have said that they will support 19 for a very long time. Now, I do personally think that Sage has made a lot of effort in pushing people into the next version by cutting down on the tax table releases that they have, and they want to encourage people. But I do think that they understand what a big deal this is, and I do think that they're going to be a little bit more generous in the amount of time that they will continue to support version 19. But I would encourage you to not delay for any unnecessary reason. You certainly don't need to do this next month. You don't need to do this Q2. But Q3, you should at least have it installed and be thinking about this testing process. If you have some critical software that is not available in version 20, that's completely understandable, and I would say continue to watch for updates from Sage. I would be surprised if they did not also support 19 into the next year, 2018, but no one's going to make any promises on that.
Okay, Kathy, I actually remuted everybody because there was too much feedback. So if somebody does have a question, use the raise your hand function and I can unmute you just one person at a time. Although I did get one more question in the question bar here.
Okay.
Is there two actually now? So we use Syscon as our hosted environment. Can we download version 20 from you?
If you are using our hosted environment and you have a private hosted server, we will help you with that. Please do not download the software. Give us a call at the office and we'll be more than happy to set up a date when we can install version 20 with and for you and begin looking at this tool. We already have version 20, so we don't need anything downloaded, but we have not put it on your private server because, of course, you're not ready to have that conversation with us. When you are, we will work with you to get it installed, but please do not download it to your private server. If you're in our multi-tenant hosting environment where you don't have a private server, you're in a shared space, we will be doing this for you, and the question there will be what kind of prep work do you need to do to be ready? There will be a day when we will cut over to version 20. It is in the future, and you will have plenty of notice when that day is coming, and we are more than happy to have conversations with you well in advance of it. So you're not going to wake up one day and find out your environment is on version 20.
Okay, yep, I got it. Is there a comparison table that would show benefits of migrating to version 20?
So that's there are definitely benefits, but it's more of a requirement, I would say, than benefits. Sage is not going to support version 19 forever. In the broadest sense, it's going to be more performant and more secure. That's pretty much in the overall, assuming you have everything set up right. I see Jim
Yeah.
adding that in there. But and that's in the very broadest, most general sense part of it. But it's not really as much of a benefit from Sage as it is a requirement for things to just progress forward.
But let me speak to that for a minute. I can appreciate the question, and yes, you're going to go to version 20, and they will stop using 19, but I want to talk about why. It's kind of like when Microsoft says they're retiring the Windows 2003 operating system. They simply can't support that forever. That is very old technology. It was an old operating system. It's not performing in a manner that's commensurate with current software programs. Sage 100 Contractor is built on a very solid foundation, but the technology, the programming language, the structure is over 20 years old and has had some minor revisions along the way. It really needs to take advantage of the SQL tables. SQL moves data better. It's just a better platform for handling the data and the speeds of it and the organization of it. And frankly, the transparency. So Chris and Jim talked about the security. Knowing who changed what when, that's really important. It's really important, especially in a larger organization.
With the proper resources and the proper disk space, you'll see some performance increase overall with using a database engine versus flat files. I mean, we've highlighted the security features several times, but there's a really large difference to being able to use Windows authentication. Great simplicity to you. You could take that password post-it that we hope you don't have and throw it out in those scenarios.
Okay.
And I actually am really excited about it because it makes all of our programming options way wider. Before we had some limitations with the database before, and some things are more complicated than others. Now we have a lot more options with this new backend.
Yes. So resign yourself. Take a deep breath. It'll be okay. We had some of the same problem when we went to version 16. We had a problem when we went to 18 with rolling posting periods. Why can't we just have it the old way? This is a good change. It's a long time coming, and in this industry, we need to be on more current technology, and the new programming languages, we need to take advantage of SQL. Any others, Brian?
Okay, I'm going to check. David, I just unmuted you. Was that the question you typed in the question pane, or do you have another one?
This is Warren. You unmuted me.
Oh, I'm sorry. It says David here.
That's David. No. And I typed that.
Okay. All right. Anybody else with questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Oh, go. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So, how long does it take to migrate the data? And I know this is dependent on the company, the size, this, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But on a football-sized spectrum of timeline, how long does it take to actually migrate the data from the current database to the SQL tables?
So I'm going to let Chris say that because we've actually done quite a bit of testing with a lot of different size data sets. So Chris, what have you found?
So I've done probably a little over a dozen migrations, maybe even 20 now, and they were as short, for an average company, medium-sized, I would say 20 to 35 minutes for a new company to be migrated over. We've been on Sage for 20 years, using Sage internally, and ours takes a couple hours because it has data in 1997. And then the biggest one I've done actually took 3.5 hours to do.
But if I remember, that's a client who has like 800 weekly union paychecks that go out. I mean, that's a big data set.
Over that,
yes,
yeah. So that
yes.
is like on the farthest extreme, one of probably the biggest Sage user maybe in the country for this product is about 3.5 hours. On an average company is going to be between 25, 35 minutes.
But most of this testing was done with high performance servers behind them, so your time frames may vary based on the performance you have at your new website.
After this review, everyone's going to go out, they're going to get a new server, they're going to get the finest hard drives, and
Yeah, there we go.
get a fiber line going into their office.
Yeah.
Everything will be perfect.
Yeah.
And everything will be
No,
perfect.
but Jim makes a good point. You know, if your server is one of those older ones I was mentioning before, and perhaps you're a little short on memory, these will take a little bit longer. But I think that gives you a general idea.
All right, just one other question. How do we get the recorded version of the webinar? And I believe, Kathy, you said we will be putting this up on the website, yes?
Yeah, what I'm unclear about is whether I can put it on the website or I have to put it on the YouTube channel. So what we'll do is we'll follow up anyone who attended the webinar. We'll send you a little follow-up email with how to get access to the recording. How about that?
Great, sounds good.
Okay.
All right,
So
any
then
other questions? Oops, sorry.
Well, what I'd like to do then, and Brian, if something comes up, let me know, but I would like to thank all of you for taking the time to hear this. This is not exciting stuff, I get that. I get that it feels a little boring, but this is really important, and what we know is this. Sage 100 Contractor, if you're using it, it's critical to run your business. This is a critical software package, and it's important that it's working for you and that you don't have unexpected interruptions with your work, your day-to-day operations. And we're highlighting for you that this is very important and that you need to be educated about it and that we're here to help you. So we do appreciate you taking time to do that. If you're feeling a little overwhelmed, take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. Think through what we talked about. Break it down into some sections. Just start by putting that list together of what those reports might be. That's a great place to start, and then you can begin to get your arms around this. You do not have to do this overnight. You can take some time to make this happen and roll this out bit by bit, and we're here to help you. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. Thank you, Mary, Jim, Chris, for being available and part of the conversation today and the contribution of the slides and the research that we've already done that has allowed us to share this information with you. Check out our website, syscon-inc.com. Go to the news section. We have blogs, we have videos. Watch for our newsletters. We mail them to your offices. You can also download the newsletters from the website. We have lots of info there, and we will continue to keep you informed. Thanks again for taking the time, and please have a great rest of your week and a great weekend. Thank you.
All right, Kathy, we did have one very important question here at the end.
Okay.
Terry Bobby would like to know if the Cubs will repeat in 2017. Who would like to take that one?
Terry, I love you, and I missed you for the Lunch and Learn this year when we did our How to Close the Year. I cannot speak to that, but we can all put our prayers out there. How about that?
This is one of the things the panel is mixed on.
Yeah, okay. we have a division over here. Thank you so much, and have a great
Thanks,
day.
everybody. Appreciate your time.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you.